Honourable member for St. James South.
Honourable members who have spoken so far, who've sought to use this platform to try to educate Barbadians on the reality of what small nations like us face as members of the world, and that the struggle out there is great for us to be able to build out our economies and to provide for our people, to be able to provide the necessary housing, the jobs, the schools, the healthcare. All of these things come with a struggle. And this bill today helps to position Barbados to be a full member of a group where it will have access to the type of financing that it is going to need if it is going to ensure that our economy grows and can withstand the numerous shocks that have been coming on the world economic table. So I want to just take a moment to explain why the formation of CAF would have occurred and a number of other development institutions that have been formed outside of the regular ones that we have been accustomed to for some time. It has to do with understanding how the world table of countries, how it is organized into a food chain. We have 193 countries, 38 of which are developed nations, nations who have been able to build strong economies and have a level of dominance in terms of trade and in terms of their own economic growth. Then you've got, out of those 193 countries, you have what we call the Asian tigers in the Middle East. You have other developing countries and SIDS like ourselves, and then you also have lower income countries that struggle to be able to give their citizens some form of life, some form of sustained life. And the question that we have to ask is, how did this chain emerge, that arrangement? And what is it that makes it so difficult for small countries like ours, especially the SIDS, to be able to make a living in challenging circumstances? Now, sir, many of those developed nations were able to establish wealth by the dominant positions that they established over the world order. And what were some of the things that enabled them to build a situation where they continue to grow and develop wealth? One, through colonization, they were able to get access to the raw materials to feed their manufacturing, which then was able to feed their trade. And what was the beauty of that? You bought the inputs at very low prices, you did your manufacturing and took it to a higher level, and then you sell it back to those same countries that you may have taken the raw materials from at a much higher price than you've ever paid them for those raw materials. And so those countries remain constantly in deficit, constantly in debt, constantly struggling to provide a living because they don't have control over their own raw materials. That's one of the first elements of the dominance of these developed countries. The second thing is, having made money from this, they were able to set up the financing structures that also give them dominance. And so they're able to control lending and the terms of lending. They're able to control the processing. So for example, when we were having challenges with correspondent banking, it made it difficult for small nations like ours to complete the processing of payments to buy goods and services across the earth. And what this was in an attempt to do, one, the banks were trying to protect themselves, but the end result was that it was shutting us out from being able to do trade and to be able to be paid when we did trade. Then you have the investment structure, where you actually have rules and regulations that talk about what are the terms and conditions for investments. And ideally, what some of these developed nations want is for investments to come into countries where they don't have any responsibility, where they don't pay taxes, where they don't give good basic pay to people, etc. And then they want every concession under the sun from these governments. so that they're able to operate in a way that they could not operate at home. And so these countries remain disadvantaged within this world structure. Then the other three areas that they create dominance in, and therefore laid the foundation by which we needed to find ways for developing countries to escape, the other three areas is the area of transport. They control the ports, they control shipping, they control air cargo. And so the end result is that they could sit and decide to squeeze, and that is what Barbadians have been experiencing. While Barbadians have experienced lower taxes in this country as a result of what this government has done in an effort to put more money in the pockets of Barbadians, and then to help them face the issue of rising prices, shipping across the world in the last 5 to 7 years has caused an escalation in the inflationary prices that Barbadians have been facing, and has made it impossible. So they don't feel the benefit of the tax reform and the tax reduction because the rising prices snatches all of that away. And we continue to fight to be able to deal with that. But that comes from that control over transport. And then the media, having dominance in terms of being able to put information out any part of the globe, and to be able to influence the thinking and the tastes and the types of products and services that you put before the eyes of the people of the world, helps them to maintain that dominance in terms of creating markets for their goods. And here's what happens to their economies. Their economies have grown strong, and because they've grown strong, they've been able to provide for their domestic needs, but now they need other places to sell those goods because they can now produce even more than what they can consume. So that the nations of the world now are important, not just for raw materials, but they're important as consumption sectors. And you can literally divide the world between production sectors and consumption sectors. And as long as we do not have the capacity to get funds to invest in building out our manufacturing, building out our education, we will continue to be consumers of the producers of this world. So, if you look, here are a few facts for people to understand. As massive as the American economy is, $3 trillion worth of exports every year. Germany, 2 trillion, UK, 1 trillion, France, 1 trillion, Netherlands, 1 trillion. They earn money by our consumption in this part of the world. So the question then that Barbadians have to ask themselves is this: in whose interest is it, therefore, for those of us who are in the lower section of the food chain, in whose interest is it for us to build productive capacity, to have access to the types of funds that will allow us to expand our manufacturing and to be able to take care of our families in our countries? Sir, the only one with the greatest interest for us has to be us. Because, as was well explained by the member for St. James Central, the hostile nature of the behaviors, the decisions that are being taken in whether it's the IMF or the World Bank or wherever, that does not create the environment for small nations like ours or to respond to our particular needs. That is the reality that we are facing. So it means that small nations like ours have to find new ways to be able to carve out opportunity for our people. Now, what does that mean? It means that a young man living in my constituency who has developed taking renewable materials, he's taken waste and has now shaped it into concrete blocks, not concrete blocks, but blocks for building. He's full of hope. He is full of passion. He feels that his blocks could become a part of the Barbadian construction mix and that it has life beyond Barbados that it can export. But where is he going to find the funds to be able to build out a manufacturing plant that will allow him to mass produce and therefore be able to become part of the world's trading groups. Sir, the only hope for a young man like him and his product lies with CAF, lies with a Frexim Bank. Because those are the only two friendly places that a person like him can have the opportunity to borrow, to take a dream that he has created a product that works for climate resilience, that works for climate change, and he will only have opportunities within those two institutions. This is part of the issue. This is part of the problem. And why is this important? Because our current reality as a country is that we only export something like $1 billion worth of exports from this country. But we actually import $4.3 billion into this country. That means that there is a lot of room for manufacturing growth in this country, but that can only happen if we have access to finance, reasonable finance, that would support our young entrepreneurs. And that is why our becoming members of CAF, not only to provide access for the public sector and public sector activities, but also access for private sector as well. The only way out for developing countries and SIDS is for us to make sure that we are part of development institutions that respond to our needs. And that is why Barbados has chosen to broaden its participation by being a full member of CAF. And what will that provide for us? Not only the opportunity for investment in private and public, but it then allows us to add other things to make Barbados attractive, so that the monies that we borrow from a CAF, the monies that we borrow from an Frexim Bank, can then be converted into genuine opportunity that will attract jobs that our young people need. So this is why we have Business Barbados. Business Barbados has been established to allow Barbados to be able to be a first-class destination that properly supports inward investment, so that we have access to funds to build out the new types of industries, the new types of operations that will give our students at UE, our students at SJPI and BCC, the opportunity to work for good money in a job where they can utilize their skills. But in order for that to happen, not only to attract the investment, the preparation of our young people to fit those investment opportunities then is important. And that is why educational reform is so critical. And this is why the Honourable Member for St. James North and myself, the Honourable Member for St. James South, why we've been entrusted with the task of taking education and transforming it so that we can create young people who are reskilled in the new skills that are needed, and to also take our current working population and even our early retirees to upskill and reskill them so that they can participate in the opportunities coming out of our investment. And this is important. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I was very concerned when I heard the Honourable Member for Christchurch South pontificating at length, deluding himself and those whom he can gather to tell them that Barbados has done nothing for schools, that when we borrow all this money, we have not done anything for schools. For his information, for the information, sir, of the rest of the country, in this year, work has been done on 45 schools in this country, ranging from repairs, bathroom upgrades, the construction of prefabricated classrooms, doing roof repairs, repairing auditoriums, doing fencing repairs and installation of security stuff, doing lighting improvements. This is ongoing work that the Ministry of Educational Transformation has undertaken in order to upgrade our school plans for our children, so that the lovely young people who were here this morning can be in a school where the environment is pleasant. But where does that come from? That money has to be borrowed, and it comes from development banks like CAF, comes from a Frexim Bank, comes from the IDB and other places. And that is one of the reasons why we have to make sure that we are in good standing, that we are managing our financial affairs properly, so that we can gain those loans that will allow us to make the types of improvements in our education so that we can prepare our young people for the investment which is to come, so that we can build out our economy and not find ourselves constantly as consumers of products from the outside, but that we can be producers of both goods and services that can capture the imagination of other people. In the tertiary education section, sir, we are sitting already making plans to work with the same CAF, that development bank, in order to build and expand our capacity for tertiary education. And why is this important? Every year, sir, close to 2,000 young people are unable to get into our tertiary institutions because of restrictions of space. The question is, when they do not get in to a tertiary institution, where do they go? And sir, all too often, some of them fall by the wayside. All too often, they become victims of people who want to engage them in activities that will destroy their lives. So what does a responsible government do? Do you wait until you earn all the money to gradually change your schools and expand access to your tertiary education? Or do you go out and do some responsible borrowing and invest in the critical infrastructure that is necessary to make sure that the young people of Barbados have hope, that they have skills, and that through our investment strategy, they are able to find interesting jobs to do that will give them a good and a decent pay? Because without that decent pay, they'll never combat the high cost of living. So that is what this government has done. CAF will be working with us to help us expand access at the tertiary level. And what we will be able to do is to absorb all of our children who want a tertiary education. But more than that, we are also planning that we create an education economic sector, that we can sell educational services to people across CARICOM and other parts of the world, so that the money we invest in building capacity, we can use it to earn, so that we can ensure that there is a future for our children. And what will that result in? It will give us the necessary productive capacity that we need. Now, sir, I was disturbed, to put it mildly, because I believe that when you want to come to political office, you have to be serious. You have to prepare. You have to study. If you do not understand the dynamics of small island states, if you do not understand the world dynamics, then you will get up and mislead hundreds of people into believing that the presence of a Frexim Bank is the giving away of a couple acres of land, and that could have been used to do something else. It was repeated again today in this chamber, Mr. Speaker. And it shows how out of touch the honorable member is with the reality of what it takes to build the Barbados of the future. CAF, as was shared earlier by the honorable member for Christchurch East Central, is primarily 23 Latin American countries And then you have some Caribbean countries and one or two other Spanish-speaking countries that are members. Because they are looking to provide a pool of resources that can be made available to their countries to help build them out and at the same time earn by being able to provide that same funding to us. Africa has done the same. If we are going to break out of the stranglehold that has been put on transport, on raw materials, on the media, on financing, and to be able to build our economies that our young people will have a chance, then it is imperative that they form some kind of development bank institution to be able to give their enterprises a chance and their economy a way to grow. And a Frexim Bank is no different. A Frexim Bank, Honorable Mr. Speaker, was developed to help with intra-African trade so that they build more trade among the African countries. What the African countries have said is that they want to recognize us as the sixth section of Africa, being part of their diaspora. They also want to look at trade outside of Africa. And so with their headquarters that they have in Egypt, what they have decided to do, they want to begin to spread abroad. And they decided that the place where they were going to put their first bank outside of Africa was going to be Barbados. And why is this important to us? Sir, if people make a living and keep building trillions and trillions of dollars by controlling the shipping, controlling the financing, controlling the raw materials, etc., do you think that they are about to give us capacity to get ships? Do you think that they're about to give us capacity to expand our ports? Are they about to give us the capacity to expand our education? Not in this particular world. Maybe in another world. But in the world in which we live, that is not their priority. And sir, it means therefore that it was in the best interest of the dreams, in the best interest of the desires of Barbadians who want to be able to see more happen in their lives, to have better education for their children, to have better health care, better roads, better housing, to know that their housing is protected during a storm because we've been able to build resiliently, that we've been able to sort out the water problem so that they're sure when they turn a tap that water is coming out. For those people, the presence of a Frexim Bank is absolutely necessary to allow us to get the financing, to invest in transport, to invest in digital infrastructure, to invest in the development of small and medium enterprises, to invest in climate resilient projects. Sir, absolutely important. Exactly. What else would you have done with the spot? And who else would you have engaged to be able to provide us with the wonderful opportunity that a Frexim Bank is going to present to us? And I've already said, sir, that a Frexim Bank is not only coming and establishing its center here, it's going to bring a hotel. They're going to take monies and they're going to put it into the planning games program that we have, that we can actually improve the lives of people who will be around the bank. And they are going to have a trade center that is going to allow people to come and go, to engage them, to look at trade. And Barbados has the opportunity, by being the host country, to be in the midst of that and seeking to make the necessary presentations so that we can build out a Barbados that we've never seen before. We've come from sugar. We've come from a little light manufacturing. We've come from financial services. We've come from tourism. To diversify the Barbadian economy is going to take money, is going to take education, is going to call for infrastructure. And the only way to get it, sir, is to borrow and invest wisely so that you make back that money, that you can pay off that loan, but you have increased the capacity of the country to diversify itself and create new types of enterprises that can take Barbados into the future. So, sir, I do not have time for people who do not understand that, who put themselves forward for political office and do not have any intention of understanding our needs, educating our people, and taking the necessary hard decisions that are required to make this country work. We've had to take hard decisions, sir, and we will take them because at the center of our heart is the well-being of every single Barbadian. That is why we are in office. That is why we are here. That is why we work the way we do. So we want to encourage. There are a couple of things, and I'm going to finish with this. Mr. Speaker, our plans, wonderful as they are, will not work unless the Barbadian people help to engage it. And let me speak to two sections of the Barbadian public. One, sir, would be enterprises. Unfortunately, there are a number of enterprises in Barbados that have stayed in this country, not looking to expand and go out into CARICOM, as hard as the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade works to get CARICOM working, using QUOTED to be able to put all the different agreements in place to open up the space for them to move. There are some who are just satisfied to look at the Barbadian public and simply raise the cost of an item that they have not improved, that has not brought any greater value. So the Barbadian is no better off. They're just paying more for the same thing. It has to stop. We need our enterprises to understand that we cannot just be comfortable sitting in a handful of markets, buying our products from them. When you do that, you create a dependency that people can choke you. You must diversify your markets. You have to be looking at Latin America for goods. You have to be looking at CARICOM for goods. You have to be looking at Africa for goods. We have to start and do that so that we're able to keep our economy more stable, because we're not dependent on one or two markets that can choke us if they want to. The second group, sir, that I need to speak to is our civil service. They are so key to the success of this strategy by the speed at which they execute whatever it is. Whether it's processing things at the port, whether it's issuing licenses, whether it's doing inspections, whether it is issuing certificates, whether it's clearing goods, building hospitals, repairing schools. Extremely important that as we borrow this money from CAF, as we get access to the financing, the speed at which we use those funds and convert it into the projects that will take Barbados into the future, every single Barbadian is going to be better off. They must not be the weak link in that chain, because their lives and jobs depend on it. The lives and the jobs of their children and their family members depend on it. We are all in this together. And I'm asking every Barbadian, heed the call. It is time for us to understand our interests and get out and do what we need to do. Be productive. Lower the absenteeism. Lower the sloppy work. Improve customer service. Be warm and caring to each other. Make each other's lives easier. as we try to walk through this very, very difficult and challenging path. Now, we do not know what is going to be up ahead. We don't know what the future is going to hold for us as a country or as a region. But we must be ready for it. And I want to urge every Barbadian, stay the course. Stay the course. Now is not the time to shift. Now is the time to let us work together to move Barbados into the future. It will take all of us. All hands must be on deck. I'm obliged to you, Mr. Speaker.